The Mig-21Bis was once considered the best fighter in War Thunder, and still sits near the top of the list. There have been some recent changes to the plane, so let's take a look. The MiG-21 is famous in the aviation community and was an absolute game changer when it was first introduced back in 1959. However, to folks that are more familiar with Western fighters like the F-4 Phantom or the Mirage 2000, the MiG-21 might seem deficient and weird. The reason is because the MiG-21 was originally designed to fit into a role in 1950s Soviet defense doctrine. I'm not going to spend 20 minutes going down the rabbit hole, maybe some other time, but the short version is that early versions of the MiG-21 were intended to serve as interceptors, which would rely primarily on powerful ground control intercept radar stations and use radar on the ground to vector them in to find enemy targets, then get in close and use their infrared missiles and guns. That's why it seems like early versions of the MiG-21 and War Thunder have really crappy radar. They didn't need anything better back in the 1960s, even if something better had existed, which it really didn't anyway. So anyway, years pass, doctrine changes, the MiG-21 is updated dozens of times, and eventually we get the Mig-21Bis. This is generally considered the penultimate upgrade and sits at the top of the non-Chinese MiG-21 variants, both in real life and in the game. The Bis has upgraded engines, upgraded radar, upgraded countermeasures, better weapons, and slight improvements in its flight envelope over the earlier models. The Bis was introduced in 1972 and gets a full decade worth of improvements. In the recent patch, the Mig-21Bis was folded underneath the Mig-21 SMT in the research tree, so we might not see as many of these out in matches in the future. Grinding to unlock top-tier jets can be arduous, and people will probably just end up wanting to rush past it to get the MiG-23 and whatever comes after the MiG-23. So there's a pretty good chance that, the number of MiG-21 Bis flyers that we see out in matches in the community is going to steadily decrease over time, like as a proportion of the player base. So we'll find ourselves in an interesting situation with that later on. The first thing to mention about the plane in-game are the weapons. The Bis now starts with the R3S unlocked. Only 2 of them, but it's better than just the guns, so grinding out the first couple of essential upgrades won't be as painful. My personal suggestion is to make a mad dash to unlocking the other missiles and countermeasures. You can pick from a pretty wide variety of weapons, including even dumb bombs and stuff, but I'm going to go against the advice I've given in the past for other planes. Skip the bombs on this one. You won't need them. Getting kills in this plane, air kills, is easy enough where you can reliably grind out on air targets instead of needing to, pound the ground. Unless you really want to take this out as close air support and ground RB, you won't need any of the bombs or rockets. For missiles, you get the R3S, R3R, R13M, and the R60. The R3S is entry-level and isn't great. The R3R has some issues, which we'll get to in a minute, while the R13M and R60 are both outstanding weapons. The R13M has a bit more range than the R60, but a little less off-bore sight targeting capability. My general loadout is to take 2 R13s and 4 R60s in the outer pylons. This gives a little bit more flexibility out in matches. The R3R is your option for a semi-active radar missile if you like those, and honestly, I find it quite difficult to use. If you need more information about using semi-active radar missiles, check out my other video about air-launched missiles in War Thunder. I'll put a link in the description, but the primary advantage on paper is that you can fire at targets flying head-on from further away than you could with, any of your IR missile options, since they're all rear aspect. This isn't always as useful as you might think, since it takes a few moments to get a radar lock and all that. For right now, just know that the radar on the Mig-21Bis is okay. It's not great, it's not bad, it's just okay. So you'll still have occasional problems maintaining a radar lock through ground clutter, at weird flight attitudes relative to the target, and so on. The R3R tracks okay, but it has a very short range. Most people using a radar missile tend to expect that they can fire them out to medium range, but you really can't with this one. Out past 3 kilometers, expect to miss unless the target is flying at you head on. And even out past 2 kilometers, a good pilot will be able to evade this weapon. Stick to the R13 and R60 combo. I promise you won't regret it. In terms of flight performance, the Mig-21Bis is simply amazing. It accelerates like a rocket, it pushes through Mach 1 at treetop level with zero effort, it turns well, it climbs well, and has a good air brake. For a time, this was considered the best fighter in the game, and really for good reason. This thing can hang in a dogfight with pretty much anything if it's flown well. The only thing holding you back will be fuel. All versions of the MiG-21 are basically fuel critical right after takeoff, and this is the one serious weakness of the Mig-21Bis. The Tumansky R25 300 series engine gets thirsty when you punch the afterburner. However, it gives the Mig-21Bis a thrust-to-weight ratio of almost 1 to 1 when you're at full power. The tail delta platform bleeds off speed in a tight turn fight, so you're going to have the afterburner going most of the flight in order to compensate for this. And it does compensate for it. But this means that the MiG-21 is one of the few jets where you actually want to take a full fuel load instead of going up with half-empty tanks to save weight. They'll be half-empty by the time you get into the fight. One thing to keep in mind, the performance of the Bis model is so crazy that you can rip your wings off in a tight enough turn. So play around with test flights, both in the stock plane and after each structural upgrade to figure out where your limits are to avoid nasty surprises out in a live mission. You'll be glad that you did the due diligence. Speaking of live missions, the Mig-21Bis has an entirely different mission profile than any of the attacker jets I've reviewed so far. I still like to stay low near the beginning of a mission, but the fight is quickly going to get higher up. And remember, you're hunting enemy players, not grinding on strategic bases and ground targets. Now, this video isn't intended to be a tutorial on jet dogfights and air combat maneuvering, but just know that this plane has the performance to do what you want it to do. Don't be hesitant to fly right up into the furball. That's kind of where this plane does its best work, so long as you don't get outnumbered too badly. The combination of capable weapons, and again, I suggest the R13 and R60 combo, will give you a really credible offensive capability, and if someone slots in behind you, you've got countermeasures. Not a lot of countermeasures, but enough. Most of the times that I've been shot down in this plane have been when I just didn't see the other player. Failures of situational awareness rather than failures of the plane's performance. If you can maintain good SA and respond well, the Mig-21Bis will prove highly survivable for you. And this might help mitigate the exceedingly high repair cost. At the time of making this video, it's over 14,000 Silver Lions. The good news is, you're not going to get shot down as often in this plane. The visuals with the Bis are great. You get a variety of fun skins you can unlock or find on the marketplace, and the cockpit detail is pretty good. I really wish that the Bis didn't have the mirror right up at the center of your upwards view, obstructing the canopy, but otherwise flying with the VR headset was really pretty great. To wrap things up, the Mig-21Bis has a great selection of credible weapons. Absolutely amazing flight performance compared with the other stuff currently in the game at least, and it has good enough speed and countermeasures to help you survive. On the downside, this plane just doesn't have enough gas, and when you do get shot down, it's expensive to repair. The final verdict on the Mig-21Bis is that this thing is a monster in air combat, and if you like the Mig-21 generally, don't skip this version as you're grinding up the tech tree. As always, thanks for watching.